Well, good morning. And here today, I'm here to talk about, and this is a touchy subject, 5 things I hate about my Royal Enfield. 5 things I hate. Chances are, if you guys have been watching this channel for any length of time, you already know what those 5 things are. In fact, I'm going to give you a minute to guess. Alright, I'm not going to give you a full minute. Those of you that took a bother to guess, you probably know what the 5 are. So we're going to go ahead and start with number 5. So the Royal Enfield, this particular model, now the newer versions don't have these issues. And before all the hate stuff starts, I'm going to do 5 things I love about my Royal Enfield as well. So settle down. And for those of you that ride the newer Enfields, these things might not be an issue for you. And of course, everything is subjective, and just like all opinions, we all have them. So here we go, number 5. This particular model of Royal Enfield, this is a 2002 Royal Enfield Bullet 500. And my number 5 thing that I hate about this bike, I hate it and I don't hate it. There's really nothing I hate so much about this bike that I just have got to come and rant about it. I'm doing it because everybody's done the 5 things I hate and the 5 things I love series. So that's what I'm doing too. Alright, you ready? Number 5. Number 5 is going to be the wheels. The wheels on this bike. They go round and round. They're spoke wheels. That's beautiful. But they're both 19-inch. They're exactly the same. So you have to buy a slightly wider back tire, but not too wide because the frame and the swing arm doesn't allow you to put much wider of a tire than you do on the front. So what happens with that is your selection for being able to buy tires for this bike is very small, and so then you have to make accommodations other ways. So what I did when I needed tires for this bike was I ended up going and getting 2 of the exact same tire. They're Shinko 777s, and we just flipped the back one there, reversed the tread pattern, just flipped it, the direction on it, and that's what I use for tires. And so I have the same size on the front as I do on the back, which isn't a perfect situation, but otherwise you're relegated with this bike to buying some of the classic looking tires, and I had those on here. I had the Avon Skidmaster. That's what I call them, the Avon Skidmasters, and yeah, those things are garbage. At least on this bike they were. Maybe they work great. They look authentic as hell because they got the ribbed front end, you know, for our pleasure, and the back tire, you know, it looks like a tank, but it's nice and flat. It's not very round. And if you push anything that might resemble performance on this bike at all, in other words, you know, really dipping into the corners once you're going, yeah, you didn't experience a lot of confidence with those tires. So that was number 5, is the wheel size makes it difficult to buy a wide array of tires for this bike. You don't have a lot of tire options. On the newer Royal Enfields, the back tire, the back wheel is slightly smaller than the front. If they do have a 19 up front, they've got an 18 or a 17 in the back. And there's more complete tire sets that you can find for those. All right. So number 4. Number 4 is going to be the cables on this bike. Now, through Hitchcock's in England and some of the places, the Royal Enfield aftermarket places online, I can get replacement cables out the wazoo. That's not a problem. The problem is I can't buy extended cables, so I can't change the handlebars unless I go out and get custom ones made. And I don't ride this bike often enough, and it's not important enough to me to change that. But that brings me to number 3, and that's the handlebars. I really wish these handlebars were just a little bit wider. They feel kind of narrow, and I've always thought that, even from when the Enfield was my only bike. I really thought that. So the handlebars are number 3. And number 2 would be the alternator. The alternator on this bike is very low power. I've switched everything over to LED to help me out so that my amps stay in the positive even when I'm idling it. But that's what it took. With all of the regular light bulbs that came on this bike from the factory, if you're sitting there with your headlight on, which first of all, the headlight draws directly from the alternator, it doesn't, so it's not going to necessarily drain your battery, but it is impacting the performance of the alternator. But at any rate, if you're sitting there with your hand on the brake, so your back brake light is lit up, the pilot light's on, you've got the gauge lights on, you know, you're in running light condition. With the stock lights and a turn signal on, God forbid you had a turn signal on too at the same time, you're draining your battery at every stoplight. And if you're using this to bus back and forth in town like I was for about a year, this was my little commuter bike. I would just use it to bus back and forth, take all the back roads throughout the neighborhood. You're draining your battery at every single stoplight. And so I ran into that issue, and then ultimately the voltage regulator failed. And I'm not sure what happened there, but it caused an issue for the stator as well. So I ended up having to I just replaced the whole charging system. I changed entirely changed out the alternator and replaced the rectifier regulator combo and moved on. And since then, with the LEDs and everything, I've never had a problem. But that's one of the things I didn't like. I felt like with the bike that didn't even have 10,000 miles on it, to have to replace that was a little shoddy, but recognizing, of course, that the bike's very inexpensive, and this particular bike really is modeled after, with the exception of it being 12 volt and they added that electric leg to the front end, this bike's design elements are more or less unchanged from the 1955 motorcycles. So that's where it's at. All right, and the number one thing, everybody knows it. Everybody knows it. If you've been watching my channel at all, you'll know the number one thing I hate about this bike, right? Everybody say it with me on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Front brake. Front brake. The front brake is a twin leading drum brake. And in order to make the front brake effective, whenever you replace the shoes, you have to deck them. Basically, what you do is using the operation that they call for in the manual, right? You sort of sand down and deck the shoe so that the shoe more completely fits the drum, so that it makes the surface area makes contact throughout the pad. Whereas when you put new pads in, there's a good chance you're only going to catch one little edge of each of the pads. Well, so the problem with that is that more often you have to change those drum pads. Now, changing brake pads on this bike isn't that terribly difficult, but it is inconvenient, and it does drive up the overall cost of ownership, especially if you're someone that can't do it yourself. If you can't do it yourself, you're left having to pay someone. Well, you know, it depends on how much you ride the bike, I suppose, or how much you like your brakes. What's going on here? What are we doing here, folks? Depending on how much you use your brakes or how much you like your brakes, you're going to be changing those pretty often, as I do. And honestly, even doing that method, even brand new springs, you got good high temperature lube on the pivots, you got brand new cable, everything brand spanking new. In fact, better than new, because you can buy parts from Hitchcock's that are actually better than what was put on this at the factory in India. And even better than new, the front brake is less than stellar. So I'm going to be converting it. I'm picking up the Hitchcock's front disc conversion for this model bike, and I'm going to go ahead and go through with it, because I think I'll get a lot more enjoyment out of my bike because of that. One of the issues I have is I want to ride it up Mount Lemmon, because this thing just loves to chug along, tons of low end torque. And going up Mount Lemmon, you never get out of third gear, really, in all honesty. Just bumping up Mount Lemmon, I'd never get out of third gear on this bike. I'd never need to. But coming down the hill, I want to, on the straightaways, be able to lay into that front brake and ease off the speed, back off the speed a little bit. And I just don't trust this front brake. So I think I'd get a lot more enjoyment out of it if it's a disc. The disc won't look as good as the drum, but what are you going to do? So anyway, that's my hates. And just to prove to you that I'm not some kind of weird hater, stick around and watch for the next video, because the next video's going to be 5 things I love about my Royal Enfield. Thanks for watching, guys.
Good job.